This is a reading of the Inlay booklet that came with the 2000 remaster release of Queensryche's first EP, simply titled Queensryche. Originally released in 1983. It all started in 1981 with The Mob, a tightly knit group of friends playing covers of mostly British metal, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and the like, around their hometown in Seattle. But they were less than thrilled with their frontman and guitarist Chris DeGarmo convinced locally renowned singer Jeff Tate to join them for some shows, with the hope that the situation would become a permanent arrangement. While Tate enjoyed the experience, he felt somewhat confined by the lack of self-expression inherent in any cover band. His band at the time, Myth, which also featured guitarist Kelly Gray, who would later play with Queensryche, was writing its own material, while The Mob was not. Moreover, Tate was more interested in progressive rock than the basic metal that The Mob was focused on. But Tate and DeGarmo stayed in touch, and when DeGarmo and his bandmates had their own original tunes to record a year later, they called on Tate once again. He was sufficiently impressed to agree to record with the band on the condition that they test the waters first by writing a song together. The result was The Lady Wore Black, one of the 4 songs which not only constituted the band's first demo, but also its first major label release. There are very few bands who can truthfully claim that a major label released their first demo. But there were still bridges to cross before that major label deal would materialize. Queensryche had been adopted as a new name for the band. The last E came a little later, but the change of name did little to raise their profile. The band themselves were excited about the music they were making together and knew that they had created something special in the studio. Everyone who heard the tape was blown away by it, but in the musical backwater that was Seattle in the early 80s, nobody who could make a difference was within earshot. Feeling that they had nothing to lose, the band mailed out unsolicited tapes to all the major labels. Who knows if anybody actually listened to them? Certainly nobody responded, and an unsigned band that wasn't playing covers was not exactly a lucrative situation to be in at the time. But the band was not daunted. They had a collective chemistry which excited them all, and they were no less excited about the music they were making together. All of the traditional metal imagery was there, but so much more besides, thanks in no small part to the progressive elements Tate had brought with him from Myth. And so they persisted. A year later, drummer Scott Rockenfield's brother referred them to Kim and Diana Harris, former record promoters who had opened the Easy Street record store, feeling that the Harrises might be able to help the band make some progress in getting their music heard on a wider scale. He was right. The Harrises had taken on management of the band, and instead of recirculating the demo, they opted for a different strategy. Metal was strong in Europe, and the press there was much more influential than in the States, due to the lack of radio exposure for anything but mainstream pop, and with the result that a lot of interest could be generated with imagery and words. And by chance, it fell to me to write those words. A tape was dropped off at the Kerrang offices by the Harrises, and the songs were a blast of fresh air in a genre prone to excess cliche. The affection for the likes of Judas Priest were evident, but the band had crafted something far more innovative and adrenaline-packed than their contemporaries or even the bulk of their peers. Very few genuine heavy metal bands write material as classy as this, I wrote. And very few writers of classy songs can get as utterly vicious as this. Queensryche's unique blend of melody and muscle would have been a shock to the system coming from anyone, but from a bunch of young unknowns, it was truly something special. That piece appeared in Kerrang in late February of 1983, and within days the mail started arriving at Easy Street Records. Literally thousands of letters begging to hereby be given a copy of the tape. Rather than sending out cassettes, they realized that there was enough interest to actually press up the demo as a 12-inch EP. thus giving birth to the 206 records, and by the summer of 1983, over 60,000 had been sold. With numbers like that to their credit, Queensryche was in a position to demonstrate to the record industry at large that they did indeed merit some serious attention. They may not have fit in any executive's notion of what a successful metal band should sound like, but they were already successful, and that was just too much to ignore. EMI Records was actually the first choice, and when they managed to get through to the A&R department, there they were astonished to discover that an old contact, former Seattle radio programmer and morning DJ Mavis Brody, was working there. After having the EP blasted through the phone at her, Brody agreed to fly to Seattle and see the band. Several canceled trips later, she was on the verge of losing out to more aggressive labels because the buzz had now started in earnest. But finally, she flew in for a rehearsal, and within weeks, the band was signed without having played a single live show. So behold, the 4 pieces of music which laid the foundation for all that was to follow. With one foot in traditional metal and the other striking out into unknown territory, it's an impressive calling card for one of the most innovative bands of an entire generation. Paul Sutler, a note from Jeff Tate. In the summer of 1981, I had my cards read at a medieval Renaissance gathering in the deep forest in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. The tarot said that I would soon come into contact with people and music that would set me on a life path. By springtime, I was writing with Queensryche, and an interesting chemistry was developing. The EP is the beginning of the path, and the first scribbling in a musical diary of personal development and discovery. This is another small note from the booklet, titled From Somewhere in a Tour Bus in Europe. With the release of our Queensryche EP on compact disc, the songs have now completed an audio journey that began in 1982. Originally envisioned as a demo tape, the project, our first original tunes, was recorded at our neighborhood studio during a graveyard hours, the cheapest rate, so that we could work our day jobs to pay for it. Thus began its transformation from low-budget demo to self-released EP, the memorable jump to vinyl, to re-released by EMI Records, stacks of vinyls and cassettes, and now compact disc, which wasn't even a reality back in 1982. We toyed with the idea of remixing the songs, but quickly decided to leave it exactly as we recorded it. Our apologies to Tom Hall, dearest Tom, who is knob twister and clever storyteller, convinced us he had recorded a band before, who would love a second shot at it with us, but alas, here it is in its original form, continuing its journey. Thank you for making it happen. Dated October 1988. This completes the reading of the booklet from Queensryche's first release, their EP, self-titled Queensryche, originally released in 1983. Thanks for listening.